Welcome to today's episode of People and Strategy. I'm your host, Mo Fatalbab, President of International Facilitators Organization. People and Strategy is a podcast from the SHRM Executive Network, the premier network of executives in the field of human resources. Each week, we bring you in-depth conversations with the country's top HR executives and thought leaders. For today's conversation, we'll be talking about the intersection of AI and HR. I'm excited to be joined by Kathleen Pearson, CHRO at McDermott Will and Emery. She's a thought leader on AI's transformative potential in HR. Welcome, Kathleen.
Hi, Mo. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. Kathleen, tell us about your career journey and what brought you to the field of HR.
So I have what would be considered a non-traditional route to HR. I actually started my career in marketing and business development in law firms. I've always been in the law firm industry. And I, really learned the business first from a marketing and business development perspective. But there was always that people aspect. It was always drew me into how teams work together, how you drive strategy, and how, really you bring people together to solve problems. So I transitioned from marketing and business development, an easy transition into recruiting. And, that's sales for just a different type of audience, right? You're selling the organization to candidates, right? And so that was my first foray into HR, and I just loved it. And again, learning how to build teams, learning how to bring people together from different backgrounds, and I fell in love with HR from that point on, and the rest is, I guess, history.
Well, I want to dive into how you build teams. And as a leader overseeing talent strategies at an international law firm, what core principles guide your leadership style and your approach to fostering high-performing teams?
Yeah, great question. And I think there are really kind of three key components that drive, my approach to HR and building teams. And it starts with empathy, right? You have to really understand your people and know where they are. Each individual, each team, really kind of building that trust. And it starts with empathy. And the next really is continuous growth, fostering that idea that we want people to continue to grow, upskill, change. We have a very dynamic workforce, a very dynamic, world that we're in right now. And so we really have to continue to foster that idea for continuous growth. And then that springboards right into innovation, right? And that takes us to the core, hot topic that we're talking about, which is AI, right? And so, but it has to build on those three layers. You can't just jump right into innovation if you don't have that empathetic trust that's built. And if you don't have sort of that continuous growth mindset, you're not going to be ready for how to launch innovation. So again, I feel like it's this one giant circle that starts with empathy and then builds into growth, then builds on innovation.
Yeah. And I find it really fascinating to talk about empathy and trust. And I'm curious if you could unpack that correlation for us for a minute. So how does being empathetic drive trust? And how does one be empathetic? Because I'm not sure everybody really knows.
Yeah, I think that's the secret sauce, right? And it's really hard because you have to start with the individual. And most all people want to be seen, right? Even if you're delivering a difficult message, they need to be seen in the process. And you need to understand where they're coming from, where their fears might lie, where their trust issues, where there's a breakdown in communication. People just want to be seen and heard from their leaders. And so I think that's really where empathy starts. It's seeing someone, and it's saying, I may have to deliver a tough message, or you may not like what you're hearing, but I see you and I'm going to honor where you are in this process. And that builds trust, right? And the more people trust their leaders, the more, you'll have a successful team in the long run.
Yeah. And Kathleen, how did your experiences as an HR leader shape your approach to talent strategy on a global scale?
Yeah, I think that, again, that's a great question. I think when you're thinking about global strategy, you have to sort of think about culture and processes as a bend, don't break, right?
Mm.
And because there are local nuances that have to come into play. And you have to really, again, understand the nuances of the locality for what you're trying to, lead through, or the change that you're trying to make. So I think, really starts with that kind of flexibility, understanding the broad vision that you have, but then also really diving into where are the people, and, things that work in the United States are not necessarily going to work in London, and they're not necessarily going to work in Germany. So you've got to sort of understand that and think about where those people are. And again, I hate to keep beating the drum, but it goes back to empathy. And it's having people see that you care and that you're taking the time to actually, think about where they are in their journey and what will work there and what won't.
So, Kathleen, with over 2 decades of experience in human capital management, what emerging trends do you foresee in the intersection of AI and HR?
There are a lot of converging factors here, and I think that there are two, and I'll hit on both of them. One is obviously efficiencies on the true administrative side, where there are efficiencies that can be seen with AI, and we will work differently. There's also a strategy component, and that strategy will help lead how we work with people. Our workforce is going to change dramatically. I do believe that, and it already is in some pockets. And I think the emerging trends, really from an HR lens and perspective, we need to start to think about how we can add the human back into the process, right? So it's not all about machines are going to do everything and we're not going to think anymore, and that's, all that. But it's where can we have higher and better use of our humanity and create those connections with people that we're not able to do right now because we have such an administrative burden on some of the tasks that our employees have. So I think looking at that trend and really thinking about how we can add that kind of empathy and add that humanity back along with, I think Johnny says it a lot, right? He talks about AI plus HI
Yes.
equals ROI. And I think that is a key, equation. And what I see sometimes is the trend, when HR is not involved and not part of this conversation, firms and organizations tend to go a little bit too far of, we're going to slash headcount, or we're going to create all these efficiencies. So again, I think bringing in that kind of idea of how we can build teams and bring the humanity back to the work that we do.
And so if I hear you right, you're saying that by utilizing AI for efficiencies, it will allow more opportunity for human connection.
Absolutely. And if you'll allow me, I'd love to give an example, the real life example that we saw here at the firm. We do HR promptathons in order to get people's brains thinking about how AI may help and what we can do to further innovation within our organization. And one of these promptathons that we did with the HR team, we had all of our local teams get together and start to brainstorm and think about ways that AI could save them time. We started with, what's your biggest pain point? Where is your bottleneck? And one of our very talented HR managers, really identified a pain point that the team had, which was auditing performance evaluations. I know everyone in HR loves that process, right? And with an organization of our size, it took a good amount of time to do that. We're talking weeks worth of manual auditing for every single performance evaluation that was written. And we she had this idea to develop an agent that will assist in the drafting of those evaluations, and built in best practices from SHRM, best practices from employment law, the things that you would look for in a performance evaluation, and it pulls them out. And so that the evaluations from the very beginning are quote unquote cleaner, and they're a little bit easier to deal with. And we took a process that would typically take weeks, and we boiled it down to about a day.
Oh my God.
And so that's a huge time save. But immediately when she saw that, she had done this, you could almost see her, her face dropped, and she said, did I just lose my job? Or my team's job, because this is going to take such a manual process that we used, and now that time is, freed up. And I said, actually, no, you're going to be able to do what you really, the highest and best use of your time as an HR professional, which is making those connections with those managers, really getting ingrained and deeper with the departments that she supports so that she can create those relationships and work on that people aspect. So I think that's a great example of how you can take this and take some of the noise out of the work that we have and then get back to the people part of HR, which is really why we all want to be here in the first place.
I think that is beautiful. So one other thing that you said, Kathleen, which piqued my interest, is this notion that the workforce is going to look different. Can you describe how you perceive or what you think that look different is going to be?
Absolutely. I think that we are going to get to a spot that we have digital employees that we're working side by side with. And what does that look like? We don't know yet. That's exciting. But how do you evaluate these, digital employees? How do you make sure that they are efficient and providing value back to the team? So I think we're going to work differently that way. I think that we have the opportunity to, again, create connections on a human level. I think that we will have disruptions and there will be, jobs that are displaced, but there'll be brand new ones that are created. Again, how do you create sort of a digital coexistence with human employees, and where does that organizational development start to look like? How do you evaluate the efficacy of what they're doing and what could be built further? I think is really fascinating, and so I do think that we will have a very different workforce makeup in the mid to short term.
Yeah. So the other thing you mentioned is this Promptathon. And looking for bottlenecks and places where we really need some help and some improvement. First of all, I think that's a brilliant idea, and I can't imagine how many ideas you had crop up during that Promptathon. But also, I'm wondering, does that then let people just figure out whatever they want to do with AI, or do you then centralize how AI will be deployed across the whole organization?
Great question. I think that, one of the reasons we did the Promptathon in the first place is that we became very aware that there were random acts of AI that were already going on, right? So people were bringing their own AI, but working stealthily in the background, right? And so I'm in a law firm, and clearly we have guidelines and we've got very specific things that our general counsel, wants us to use this responsibly and ethically, especially when it comes to client data or in the HR space, our human capital data. So we don't want people going rogue and uploading things and fixing problems on their own without kind of those clear guidelines. And so we came up with the idea of doing an AI Promptathon to give people the guardrails and say, we want you to use this responsibly, and we want to give you permission to use this. Because I actually had an HR coordinator called me one day and she said, Kathleen, I think I need to self report something I've done. That's not anything a CHRO wants to hear. And so I said, what's going on? And she said, I used AI to write a job description because I was really jammed for time and I needed to get it done quickly. And I was like, great, that's a perfect example. You didn't have to recreate the wheel, but let's talk about which platforms we can use to do this responsibly. So we went and did the Promptathon to bring all of these teams together and crowdsourced it and made it a fun game. And we had an IT professionals for each team while they were going through the process. And the IT team was amazed because this is not a product or a particular software that is going to be used the exact same way by everyone. It's not Excel. It's not just going to do this. And so giving people that room and space to explore was key.
Yeah.
And the IT professional said, I have never seen that many light bulbs go off so brightly all at one time. Because everyone just instantly got it because they were working together and they were thinking more holistically about how it could help. And so now, flash forward, we took a lot of those ideas and built different things that we can do. We've got different GPTs that we've deployed. We've got some teams that are writing their own. And again, giving them the opportunity to sort of get that mindset shift. and then they can start to use it and deploy it in the right way, and we can monitor it. So
Yeah,
it's been a really fun journey.
it sounds like it. So I want to go back to the random acts of AI. I love that. But what are the dangers of random acts of AI within a firm?
Absolutely. I think if you don't know how to use AI appropriately and you're not using, so we have an enterprise account that has the guardrails built in. So the models are not being trained on our data. But if you are bringing your own AI and you happen to upload something, it is now out there for the world to see. So there's data privacy issues that come up with that. I think really understanding the limitations of AI, it's not perfect. And I think that people assume that something is a perfect output. It's not. You have a very, very talented, very smart PhD in your pocket that wants to please you, but it's a 5-year-old. So it sometimes goes rogue. Just like I would never ask a team member to write a report for me, and then I give that without review to the general counsel, right? I would always review. So it's reminding people that you need to review, you need to be responsible, you really need to double check citations, all of the things that you would do if you ask an assistant to do something for you. You would not just go ahead and automatically send that to your boss. You would check it. And so I think when you think about random acts of AI and people not using it responsibly, that's where it comes at. It's people uploading things that are inappropriate or using the wrong tool or assuming that it's absolutely 100% correct. It's just like a human. It has errors.
So, Kathleen, how should HR leaders prepare to adapt to the rapidly evolving integration of HR and AI?
I think that HR leaders need to get in the pool right now with it. Really, you need to understand how to use it. You need to understand what its limitations are and what your teams can do and study up on all the different models that are coming out. There's something new coming out almost every day, and so it's hard to keep up with it. So you just have to start using it and start to change your mindset a little bit around whenever you're about to start a new project, think, can AI help me with this? Is this something that I might be able to leverage AI to get better insights on? Just start using it, because if you don't start using it, your organization will, and you're going to be behind the curve. And HR really needs to be at the forefront of this. We really need to be driving this, because we're going to have a population that doesn't understand it, doesn't understand how to change and move with it. And it goes back to those kind of core principles like empathy, continuous learning, and innovation, and continuing that cycle and apply that here. So I think it's just really, really key. If you've not started yet, go use ChatGPT just once.
I think that is great advice. And I remember when I had not used it and I felt like I was behind the 8 ball. But what's really interesting for people who maybe are a little worried about jumping in with a professional request, you could also use it for personal things, right? I wonder if you have any examples where you may have used it personally.
Absolutely. That's actually exactly where I started. So we were going to take a family trip to Europe last year, and we had the itinerary ready, and I went to ChatGPT and I said, tell me one restaurant that I absolutely have to eat here. Tell me one, normal, like the regular touristy thing that is a must-see here, and give me one off the beaten path that a local would know that I would not. And so, it gave me an itinerary for each place, and we used all three, and it was perfect. It was brilliant. Another way I used it, when I got my husband to start using it, we were at Home Depot, and we were going to buy a lemon tree. And the lemon tree, there were two, and he was like, I don't know which one, or if this will even grow here in San Diego. So I turned on ChatGPT Vision and I said, look at these two trees and tell me which one is healthy and if this will grow in San Diego. And she looked at them and said, that one looks diseased, don't buy it. And this one will grow great, you need to have it. And gave me a whole list of things that I needed to do with the tree. I mean, so there's tons of things that you can do.
I love that. I love that. And I have to admit, I have not used the visual aspect of ChatGPT just yet. So that'll be the next thing I try. Thank you for that. So Kathleen, I know that you're a board member at Lambda Legal and you have a deep passion for inclusion. How do you think AI will affect inclusion in the workplace?
Great topic. I think it can actually level the playing field in quite a few ways. I think we can use AI to make sure that our hiring practices are equitable and start to remove some of the bias. Now, you obviously have to be careful with bias with the system too, but you can also find ways to build an AI that helps with the screening process, that helps remove some of that bias. And it can also do some workforce analysis that uncovers perhaps some trends with a particular population that you may not be aware of and may not be aware of kind of the trends in the workflow or how people are getting their work or the training opportunities that people have. I think there's a lot of creativity that we can use in this space for inclusion and creating more opportunities for people than we typically would when we're just trying to manage the workflow of our teams organically.
So, Kathleen, how do you leverage technology to scale and develop talent in your organization?
Great. So, one of the things that we've done with AI, like I mentioned, was the Promptathon, and we've expanded that out to all of our different business units and given them the opportunity to do that. We've also used and leveraged LinkedIn Learning. We've tied that to performance evaluations and goal setting to give managers that opportunity to really work directly with the employees and staff to make sure that they are growing and have the opportunity to continue to learn in areas that they have identified either as a future growth potential or something that we need as an organization to upskill people. We also try to do pulse evaluations routinely to talk about and ask where we might have learning opportunities and better opportunities for people to leverage the technology as well as upskilling and learning in different areas.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you've touched on some of the uses. What platform do you reach for the most? And are there any other uses that you could point to that you haven't shared yet?
Sure, I absolutely am a ChatGPT enterprise user. It's my go-to. I like the reasoning models that they have, and the deep research is amazing. You can actually run a deep research report and take that very lengthy 45-page document sometimes and drop it into another platform called Notebook LM. That's by Google, and it will do a summary for you. It will give you a briefing document and actually generate a podcast with two people talking about the topic. So that's a great way to learn, and it's a great way to build new skills yourself. And then also, like the note-taking apps for Otter AI, I use those for meeting annotations, and also Napkin AI is a great tool that you can use to build flowcharts. So I think there's lots and lots of them out there, but those are my go-tos.
Yes. And what are your thoughts on the new memory update in ChatGPT that remembers all of your conversations?
I think it's a blessing and a curse, right? So I think as it learns from you, I think it's great because it will remember what you've done in the past, and you don't have to have just a linear prompt. So there's a deeper understanding. So it really becomes like an assistant. One thing that I really like to do at the end of every week, I actually ask it, go through all the things that we've worked on and give me a report for how much time you've saved and areas that I can improve and work with you differently. And so the memory feature allows that. And so it allows me to capture and realize like, oh, wow, I really kind of went down a rabbit hole here, or and it gives you opportunity for how it's learning how you work and it's learning how it can help you. So I think that's great. Now, on the flip side of that, it's also a little scary that it remembers everything about you. So that can also be a challenge as well.
Yeah, that's a concern for sure, because is that going into the public domain?
Exactly. And I believe it is. So it knows a lot about you. And I would like to think that it's not being used in nefarious ways, but Sam Altman would have to answer that question.
We'll have to let him answer that question. Exactly. Kathleen, what measurable outcomes have you observed when it comes to how AI is used to enhance employee development and feedback systems within your organization?
So the feedback systems are really interesting and important. We're building those into our employee evaluations right now. And the way people used them last year, before we actually had the agents built, people did use them for the performance evaluations. And what we found was it was a much richer and deeper a performance evaluation draft. So the managers sometimes struggle deeply with giving honest feedback. We all have that problem. It's hard when you really like this employee and you need to give them sort of that development message maybe. And managers sometimes struggle with that. Actually, a lot struggle with that. And what we found when they use these tools, because you're iterating back and forth with this agent that can help you write this, it can write in an empathetic tone that gives the employee actual better feedback. The worst nightmare for HR is when that feedback is not honest. And, oh, this is the best employee ever. And then 6 months later, they say, it's time to fire them, right? And we don't have the tools to do that. And the employee never had the opportunity to get better. And so we really found that it was a much better outcome. The people were able to get much better feedback, and it was much more honest. And again, it took less time because the manager wasn't sort of struggling with that white space. And then they were also able to use it to create talking points in and around that evaluation. So when they sat down with the employee, they were armed with empathetic ways to talk to the employee and share that feedback. So I think that's a great example of how, we sort of elevated the thought process for our managers and created a better experience for our employees. And it took less time.
Gotta love that. That's a win-win-win.
Yeah. And we built that in-house. So that was a tool that we were able to build in-house, which again, is sort of thinking about how we use this technology in a very different way.
And how long did it take to build it in-house? I'm just curious.
About a week.
Amazing.
About a week. And we were able to ground it in our own competencies. So building it in-house, we were able to feed it, what our employee expectations are and really craft it and make it McDermott, right? So it is what works for our people and it feels organic and natural for our folks, as opposed to an off-the-shelf that sort of has someone else's parameters built in.
Amazing. Last question, Kathleen. What is one piece of advice that has shaped your work or personal life?
That's a hard one. I think is to lean in. And if you'll allow me just to give one more story, I'm a storyteller by nature.
Please.
I'm from the Southeast, and I did not grow up driving on ice or snow. In fact, when Southerners see ice and snow, we typically do what you're absolutely not supposed to do, right? You slam on the brakes. What happens when you slam on the brakes on ice?
You keep sliding.
You slide into the ditch,
That's
right? And so this notion of leaning into challenges kind of keeps coming back and resonates with me. So leaning in is what you're supposed to do if you're sliding on ice. You're supposed to turn the wheel into the slide and slide in. And so I think this idea of leaning in is really key. When things feel uncomfortable, when things feel scary, don't slam on the brakes because you're going in the ditch, but lean into it, figure out why, and then lean through it. So that's really, a friend of mine told me that story a couple of years ago, and it's just resonated with me in so many different ways, especially in today's environment.
I love that. And that's where we'll end it for this episode of People and Strategy. A huge thanks again to Kathleen for your valuable insights. You can follow the People and Strategy podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, podcast reviews have a real impact on podcast visibility. So if you enjoyed today's episode, leave a review to help others find the show. Finally, you could find all our episodes on our website at shrm.org/podcasts. Thank you for listening and have a great day.
SHRM.